it's got a new name, quiet quitting. Ooh, right? But it's just a great way to sell shit, right? But what they ultimately talk about is, well, it's they're unsatisfied with their job because we haven't focused on the culture or whatnot in the business, or we haven't really encouraged employees. Well, when they've surveyed a lot of people about this and they've done studies on this, what we find consistently is the number one reason people are doing the quiet quitting or resigning or part of the great resignation and all that stuff, the number one reasons are low pay, lack of advancement.
Makes sense to me. I mean, if you don't pay me enough for the headache you're expecting of me, I might stick around if I feel like I need the paycheck, but I'm going to do the bare minimum, probably. I'm not, and if I'm somebody who wants to advance, and I actually don't really see that as much of an option,
Right.
what am I working so hard for? You're already not paying me anymore, and you're not going to give me a chance to advance anyway, so what am I breaking my neck for?
Right, I'm stuck
Nothing.
where I am. It doesn't matter how nice my boss is, or how often they bring in donuts and bagels, or what the office culture is necessarily like. That might, make me a little bit more enthusiastic to come to work if I know it's pleasant, but it's not necessarily going to make me work harder, especially when there's no incentive. There's nowhere for me to go. Right? So it's kind of, they don't seem to get that point. And what I think is so ironic about it, and he points this out from the beginning, and we'll get into this more, is what was it that caused wages to go up? Because wages have been fairly stagnant for decades, right? Wages had not hardly gone up at all for like 20 or 30 years. And all of a sudden, we're seeing these rapid growth in wages. What is that? Well, it's because the employers couldn't get workers and they became desperate, so they started to have to offer more money. So the employers weren't incentivized to get more workers until the workers started leaving because the workers weren't incentivized to stay. So this notion of, well, if we just change the corporate culture and it'll make it all better, I think it's just a fucking pie in the sky thing because you guys didn't start making, paying more and giving raises and stuff until you were up against the wall. Right? Your employees are up against the wall. They don't usually have. I mean, typically, like you said, it's a correction. Typically, the employee is at the disadvantage. You don't get to negotiate the pay in a lot of situations. You're just told this is what it is. Take it or leave it. And like he said, if you don't like it, fucking find another job. We don't care. The employers had that. Now they can't say that. They'd rather you quiet quit because if you actually quit, then they have to fill that position. If you quiet quit, well, then at least you're doing some work, right? Even if I'm not thrilled about it, you're still doing something. So I think they missed kind of the point on this. You got to incentivize people somehow, and the best way to do it is with money or with promotion, more responsibility, whatever. But money is the big key one there. Is you got to pay them. So here's Davos. Now here is a panel. I think it's got a psychology professor and the CEO from Vimeo, and those are the two we're basically going to listen to. But there's a couple other CEOs, but they're talking about this quiet quitting phenomenon, and it's just so soft soaked. But we're going to go through kind of what they're talking about here. So we just heard one guy's opinion of psychologically why that kind of happened. Here is another opinion about that.
Employees are drawing sort of new line, like think a lot about work-life balance, don't consider their jobs their hobbies. I find this sort of incomprehensible, but and that's sort of a fundamental social shift. Do you think that's true?
I don't entirely buy that it's a fundamental shift, in part because this has happened with multiple generations, right? So, everybody at some point in their career has said, well, I had to walk 5 miles or kilometers in the snow barefoot uphill in Davos of all places, which is torture, in order to get where I am, and you should have to suffer the same fate. And I think every subsequent generation has put up a boundary and said, no, we're not going to tolerate this kind of treatment anymore. We want to break the cycle. What's different now is that we have more tools and more ways of expressing our voice. But if you look at the data, there's a psychologist, Jean Twenge, who studies generational differences. And she says a lot of what you think is a generational trend is actually an age difference. Because we're confounding the two when we look at generational differences. Is it because you're a millennial or a Gen Z, or is it because you're 23? And overwhelmingly, what we see is that people want the same things out of work from every generation. That if you see entitlement in a young workforce, guess what? You were entitled at that age too. You were just a little bit sneakier about it. So I think there's probably more to say about fundamental human psychology reacting to changes in context than there is about fundamental changes in human psychology.
So I think he makes a great point there, which is part of this is that nothing has changed. This is just sort of how it's always been, right? And the older generation spits on the younger generation, thinking they're lazy, and it's like, no, they're pretty much exactly like you were.
And you felt pretty much the same way for pretty much the same reasons. And now they are, but you suffered through it, and you're closer to your end, of that type of situation. So you care less, but they're looking at it and thinking they still have a lot of more years to go, and they kind of don't want to deal with that for that long.
Right. And a lot of it's perspective. It's like if I have more time, then I'm more apt to be like, well, no, I want to go after my dreams. If I'm older, I'm kind of like, I'm happy where I am, right? And you should be just grateful, right?
Right.
It's the old joke about, you need to study hard and get a good job, otherwise you'll end up flipping hamburgers. And then it's like all these people, it's like, oh, go to college and do all this stuff. It's like, what, you're too good to flip hamburgers now because they can't find jobs? And then, of course, they all fucking hate it and they quit. And then you've got all the boomers running around screaming about how come nobody's flipping my hamburgers. They've done entire segments on Fox about that. There's nobody in the restaurant. We did one where there's nobody in the restaurant. I can't get a hamburger. Why is that? I don't know, dipshit. Think about it for a minute. So he had a good point. But the other thing is once again, this also comes down to leverage. And who has the leverage? Do you as the worker have the leverage going for the job, right? Do they need you bad enough that they're willing to work with you or negotiate with you? Or does the employer have the leverage? And traditionally, the employer always has the leverage. And that's what we're really talking about here, right? And they're freaking out because after COVID, they lost a lot of their leverage to set the price. Now the employees are saying, screw it, we don't want to work. We want to unionize if we're going to stay here and ask for more wages and benefits, right? That's where you've got like all the union busting going on with Amazon and Starbucks, and they're trying to stop the unions from coming in, right? Not that unions are outside things, they're employees, right? But yeah, I mean, they're freaking out. And to illustrate the point, here is the CEO of Vimeo, and she's going to tell you a little bit about what happened with her company.
Basically about tight labor markets, and that employees are asserting themselves because you need them more and they have more leverage, and then maybe as interest rates go up, you can stop worrying about all this stuff, and they'll just have to do whatever you want them to do because they need the job. And I guess I think that's particularly true in the conversation right now around engineers, who have been like the most, like there's this incredible genre of videos that on TikTok that engineers at Silicon Valley companies make about their workday, where they bike in the mornings and then surf and then arrive at work at 10 and make a smoothie, do a little coding, and go home at like 3. And I think I was talking to a major tech CEO who said that the question everyone has about Elon Musk is like, can he break that culture of engineers, which tech CEOs quietly hate? They would like engineers to work like other employees, but there's so much demand. And I'm curious, I don't know, I mean, you two both employ engineers. How do you navigate that particular supply and demand relationship in that particular labor market?
Yeah, I mean, half of Vimeo's workforce are engineers, and we have R&D centers around the world. And we, quadrupled our team during the pandemic. And I would say that to me, the supply-demand dynamic has shifted materially in the last.
It's easier to
9
hire.
months. Yes, and companies like Vimeo are doing layoffs, and there's been a complete culture shift in the last 9 months from what I can see.
Wow.
I remember it was just to hire good engineering talent. It was so competitive, and you were throwing packages at people because you had to. I do think that's shifting. I don't think any of that changes the overall kind of opportunity that we have to engage and inspire and connect our teams, to be clear. But I do think it's changing. And the way we've thought about it is we are trying to be a bit more proactive about making sure that people that are at Vimeo are bought into the culture and actively are choosing to be here. I'll give you an example. We recently did layoffs, and we offered a voluntary package for anybody who wasn't excited to be at the company to be able to actively choose to leave. And that's something I don't think I would have done a year ago. I would have been terrified.
She just admitted the whole thing that we were talking about. When I was desperate, I was throwing packages at these people. I was negotiating on hours. I was offering more money. I was giving more benefits. I was throwing packages. Now, I don't really have a huge demand for it, so I'm going to lay you off. But if you want to volunteer to stay, we'll give you another shot. So now I'm doing these layoffs because I want to lay off these people so I can hire. If I need to hire new people, I can hire them at a lower wage now. I don't have to throw a package at them because demand is down. So now that the feed is tilted in my favor, I'm going to exploit my workers. When it was the other way around, the workers were taking advantage of me, the owner, because I had to pay more money. Boo-hoo, right? My $10,000 watch. She's wearing it on her right hand, too. She must be left-handed. But it's like she just gave away the game. But then she goes back to, but culture. But really, it's about culture, because that's what's going to keep employees happy and here. And it's the office culture. And it's really up to middle management to make the employees feel better. Right. One of the other things she pitched, which I loved when she was pitching, instead of doing emails, do face-to-face video calls, kind of like we're doing now, right? Kind of thing. Because it shows more connection, and you can respond to them better because you can see their face and get vocal inflection, all that. I'm like, yeah, you're the CEO of Vimeo. That's what your company does. I mean, of course you want to. Yeah, that everybody should be doing that. I mean, it's all kind of ham-fisted PR nonsense that they're just spinning.
Oh boy. Okay.
I don't know if you had any other thing to say about that, but here's where
No.